The courtroom was not built for humans. It was too tall, too cold, and filled with sounds that didn't belong on Earth. Lights blinked from floating panels, alien languages whispered in corners, and giant beings from across the galaxy stared from their seats. But one human stood at the center of it all, Commander Jace Revan. He had saved a planet. No, he had saved several. He didn't do it for fame. He didn't do it for glory. He did it because no one else could. And now the Galactic Council had called him forward to reward him. The head speaker, a silver-skinned alien with eyes like glass, leaned forward. "Human," the voice echoed, smooth and sharp. "You may ask for anything." There was silence. Everyone leaned in. Anything? The room trembled with possibility. Alien generals thought he would ask for their advanced warships. Galactic kings expected him to demand planets or systems. Even his fellow humans whispered about weapon tech, infinite wealth, or eternal life. But Jace did not speak. He looked across the room, past the glowing thrones and armored soldiers, past the banners and burning holograms. He looked at her, Queen Lysera, ruler of the ancient Witherian Empire. She sat quietly, her face hidden behind a veil of thin light. She was known across the stars as a symbol of power, unreachable, untouchable, unshaken. No one knew what Jace was thinking, not his crew, not the council, not even Lysera herself, but something flickered in his eyes. A calm decision already made. He took a breath and stepped forward. The council speaker tilted his head. "Have you decided, human?" Jace nodded once. His voice was steady, firm. "Yes." The council leaned in. The crowd grew quiet. Everyone waited for the name of some great treasure, some lost technology, some unimaginable reward, but Jace just raised his hand and pointed across the chamber, at the queen. "I choose her," he said loud and clear. The galaxy stopped. A deep silence spread like a wave. Gasps filled the chamber. Some stood up in shock. Others laughed, thinking it was a joke, but Jace's face was calm. "You choose the queen?" the speaker asked, disbelief in every word. Jace nodded again. "Yes." Suddenly 100 voices erupted. "He can't. She is royalty. This breaks law. Unacceptable. No human can choose a ruler." But Jace didn't move. His eyes never left Lysera's. The queen sat still, her expression unreadable. Her guards stepped forward, prepared to act, but she raised one hand, stopping them. Her voice, though soft, cut through the chaos like a blade. "Let him speak." Everything froze again. Even the speaker looked unsure now. The room was now hanging on every word, every second. Queen Lysera rose from her seat, slowly, gracefully. The glowing light around her shimmered like water. Her feet touched the floor, and she walked down the steps of her throne. Each movement was watched by millions through live broadcasts, all across the galaxy. Screens flickered with her image. She stopped in front of Jace. They were only a breath apart. Her eyes, deep violet with sparks of gold, studied his face. "You do not know what you ask, human," she said. "I'm not asking," Jace replied. "I'm choosing." Gasps again. Even Lysera blinked at that. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Not in all her years. Not in all her reign. The speaker tried to interrupt. "This is highly irregular." But the queen raised her hand again. Silence returned. She turned back to Jace. Her voice was softer now, almost curious. "Why?" Jace answered without hesitation. "Because you were never meant to sit alone." That single sentence cracked something in the hearts of many, not just in that chamber, but all across the stars. Millions watched this moment unfold with wide eyes and pounding hearts. She stared at him a moment longer, then, barely, just barely, a smile, small, quiet, and yet more powerful than any explosion in the galaxy. The silence wasn't empty anymore. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full of something new. The speaker looked at both of them. "This changes everything." Jace nodded. "I know." And the screen faded to black. But everyone watching would remember one thing. Not the war, not the reward, not the courtroom. Just the moment a human chose the impossible. And the alien queen almost smiled. Long before Jace ever pointed at her, Queen Lysera had already learned one painful truth, that being worshipped is not the same as being wanted. Her empire was one of the oldest in the stars. The Etherian bloodline ruled not with kindness, but with control. From the time she was a child, Lysera was trained not to cry, not to laugh, not to feel. Feelings were weaknesses, and queens had no room for weakness. She wore golden robes, not for beauty, but for armor. She sat alone on her throne, not for power, but because no one was allowed to stand beside her. Every day she was praised, feared, and obeyed. But not once, not ever, did someone truly see her. Until the war, the Varnak War, broke the galaxy into fire and dust. Humans new to the stars were caught in the middle. The Etherion Empire tried to stay above it, but battles spilled across every star system, and even queens were forced into the dirt. One mission had taken Lysera deep into a contested zone, a rare moment where she refused protection and went in person. She believed it was safe. She was wrong. Her transport was hit. Her guards were wiped out, and she was dragged from the wreckage by soldiers who didn't know who she was. Only one soldier stood in their way, a human, young, dirty, bleeding. He should have run, but he didn't. That human fought them, all of them, alone, with broken armor and only a half-dead weapon. And when it was over, he didn't salute her, he didn't kneel, he just held out a hand and said, "Can you walk?" Lysera had never forgotten his voice. She never saw his face clearly. Blood was in his eyes, and hers too. But the way he looked at her stuck in her heart like a mark, like heat in frozen glass. He didn't look at her like she was a queen. He looked at her like she was a person, and that changed everything. She never saw him again after that. The Empire erased the record. They called it an accident. They called the soldier a ghost. But she remembered. That moment became her secret, her treasure. Even as she ruled more planets, signed more deals, and won more battles, her thoughts would wander back to that moment. The look in his eyes, the sound of his voice, the warmth of that hand extended in the smoke. And now, standing in front of her again, in the council chamber, he had that same look. After all these years, was it really him? She had never asked for anything, but a part of her had wished for this. Not for power, not for worship, but for someone who would look past the crown, past the throne, and see her. Now he was here, not by accident, not by war, but by choice. The council was still confused. Laws were being reviewed. Judges whispered in panic. Soldiers tensed. But Lysera didn't care. Her mind was not on the rules. It was on him. "Why?" she asked again, her voice barely above a whisper, not as a queen, but as a woman who had spent too long alone. Jace's answer in part 1 had been simple. "Because you were never meant to sit alone." Now she heard it in her heart. Now she believed it. And for the first time in centuries, her crown felt heavy, not because it was gold, but because it had kept her from him. Her advisors begged her not to allow this. They warned her, "This is beneath you. This is dangerous. This is madness." But Lysera knew something they didn't. Madness was ruling a galaxy and feeling nothing. Danger was wearing armor around your soul for 1,000 years. And being alone at the top was far more frightening than choosing one man, even if that man was human, even if that man was bold. Even if that man risked everything by standing here in front of her, especially because of that, she closed her eyes and whispered to herself, could it really be him? Then slowly she looked up and smiled, only slightly, just enough for Jace to see it, not as a queen, but as Lysera. And that smile was not for the council, not for the cameras, not for the galaxy. It was for the human who once held out his hand in fire, and now stood by her side in peace. The moment Jace pointed at the queen, the council chamber froze. Not because they didn't hear him, but because they couldn't believe what they heard. He had been offered anything. He could have asked for eternal life, a planet to rule, a fleet of warships, even forbidden technology lost to time. But he looked directly at Queen Lysera and said, "I choose her." No stutter, no hesitation, just one word. Her. The room reacted like a bomb had gone off. Shock, gasps, shouts. Alien leaders rose from their seats, eyes wide. Some laughed nervously, thinking it was a joke. Others looked ready to fight. The council speaker stood up, his silver robe shining under the lights. "You are not serious, human," he said sharply. "This is a queen of ancient blood." Jace didn't flinch. "I am serious," he said. "I don't want your gold, your ships, or your weapons. I want her." A ripple of chaos swept through the audience. The crowd didn't know whether to cheer or panic. This had never happened in the history of the galaxy, a human choosing an alien queen, not for power, not for strategy, but by heart. Council guards moved forward, unsure if they should arrest Jace or protect him. The Queen's elite warriors gripped their long weapons, ready to strike, but Queen Lysera raised her hand once more, and silence fell again. She stepped forward slowly, her long robe gliding like liquid light. "Do you understand what you are asking, Jay?" "Ace Revan," she said, her voice low and clear. "Do you realize what this choice means?" Jace looked straight into her eyes. "Yes," he said without blinking. "I understand more than you think." She stared at him for a moment, then asked the question that everyone wanted to know. "Why me?" His answer didn't come from his head, it came from his soul. "Because when no one saw you, I did. And when no one stood by you, I would." The crowd went silent again. Even the most powerful generals stopped moving. Even the most advanced AI recorders paused their summaries, because this moment felt like something ancient and new, something impossible and real. All at the same time, the council speaker turned to the other members. "This violates every rule we know," he said. "This choice cannot be allowed." Another alien leader with scales across his face spoke up. "But it was promised. He may ask for anything. Wasn't that our oath?" An argument broke out between leaders. Old laws were called forward. Digital scrolls hovered in the air. Words flashed. Universal Reward Treaty. Code of Honor. First Choice Clause. Jace stood still, unfazed, as everyone around him tried to decide whether this was love or war. And Lysera, for the first time in centuries, felt alive, not as a ruler, not as a symbol, but as a woman being seen. She looked over the chamber, over the chaos, over the history crashing down like waves, and she whispered, just loud enough for Jace to hear, "You know this can start a war." Jace smiled softly. "Then let it be the first war started by love instead of hate." The cameras captured that line, and in the next few minutes it was already being broadcast to billions across space, screens lit up in every language. Let it be the first war started by love. But the war didn't come. Not yet, because in that moment something else happened. Lysera took one step closer, and the impossible occurred. She reached out and touched his hand, just for a second, but that second shattered 1,000 years of silence between their kinds. The speaker stepped back in shock. The guards lowered their weapons, unsure what to do, and across the galaxy, every citizen, human or alien, held their breath. No one had touched the Queen without permission. No one had dared, but Jace didn't grab her, didn't pull her. He just stood still, and she chose to reach out. That changed everything, because it meant this wasn't just about him choosing her, it meant she was starting to choose him back. The council had no answers. No law covered this. No history recorded it. No empire prepared for it. A human had asked for the impossible, and the impossible had reached out and touched his hand. Queen Lysera stood with her fingers gently brushing Jace's, and in that quiet moment the galaxy began to shift. Not through war, not through force, but through choice. Behind her, her royal guards stiffened, not because they feared the human, but because they feared change, and this moment was full of it. One of her commanders stepped forward and spoke urgently. "My queen, you are bound by bloodline law. No outsider may lay claim to the throne. No alien may stand by your side." His voice trembled, not with rage, but with fear, because he knew if she agreed, the entire Watherian order would shake, the rules would shatter, and the old world would burn. Lysera turned her head slowly, her voice calm. "I am not being claimed," she said. "I am being chosen." The courtroom fell silent again. Those words meant something ancient, something deep. In the Watherian culture, being claimed was domination. Being chosen was a sacred vow, a vow older than war, older than thrones. It was not just politics anymore. It was personal. Jace didn't speak. He let her stand in her power. He didn't move. He didn't pressure. And that made the moment even stronger. One by one, the alien delegates began to rise from their seats, some in protest, some in awe, some confused by emotions they didn't understand. A large reptilian delegate slammed a metallic staff on the ground. "This is an insult to the blood of the ancients," he roared. "A queen does not lower herself for a human." Lysera faced him directly. "I was not raised to kneel before anyone," she replied. "But I also was not born to be a statue. I have ruled without feeling. Now I choose to feel." Her words echoed through the chamber, and far beyond it, across satellites and news relays, into homes, ships, stations, and bunkers, into the hearts of billions watching. A child on a mining planet whispered to her brother, "She's not cold like they said." A soldier in orbit looked at the screen and smiled. "She's real." In that moment, the Queen of the Stars had become more than a leader. She became a symbol of something new. The council speaker looked panicked now. He scanned the ancient treaties, searching for anything to stop this. He raised his voice one last time. "This is a violation of balance," he cried. "If this union is allowed, it may collapse the old accords." Lysera turned slowly to face him. For centuries, those accords kept peace through fear, but they never brought understanding. If one choice can break them, maybe they were never strong at all. The speaker stepped back defeated. No argument could stand against truth. No law could stand against will, and no system could stand against two hearts choosing each other. Lysera walked toward Jace, not as a queen approaching a subject, but as a woman walking toward a man who had once saved her when no one else would. She stopped in front of him and looked up into his eyes. "You do not belong to me," she said softly, "and I do not belong to you. But if we stand side by side, maybe we both finally belong somewhere." Jace didn't answer with words, he just nodded. And in that tiny gesture, galaxies spun. Because this wasn't a story about power, it was about connection. Lysera turned to the council and made a final declaration. "Let it be written," she said. "Today, for the first time, a queen is not taken. She is not forced. She is not chosen by blood. She is choosing herself. And in that choice she stands with the one who once saw her." The council had no more words, the guards had no more orders, the galaxy had no more silence, and deep in the core of the Etherian Empire, ancient protocols began to crack, old thrones trembled, and those who had ruled through fear now faced something more dangerous than war, hope. The galaxy watched with wide eyes, every news stream showed the same image, a human and an alien queen standing together. No one had expected it. Not the council, not her empire, not even Jace himself. But deep in Lysera's heart, something had awakened, not in this moment, but in a memory that had never left her. Even when everyone else tried to erase it, it had been during the final months of the Varnak War. Her ship had been attacked, her royal guards had been torn apart in seconds. She had run through smoke and wreckage. Her golden robes were torn. Her voice had gone unheard through the static. She was captured, dragged through the dirt like a trophy. She remembered the sneers, the laughing soldiers, the way they grabbed her arms and spoke about ransom. Powerful or not, she was just a target that day. Then the noise changed. Gunfire, explosions, and finally, silence. From behind the broken wall, a single figure stepped in. A human, alone. Bleeding, one arm holding a weapon that sparked with each shot, the other arm hanging useless. She had seen many warriors in her life, but none like him. He didn't fight with glory, he didn't yell or roar, he fought like it was the last thing he would ever do, and he fought to protect her. She remembered how he stood over her body, breathing hard, blood on his face, and then softly, he knelt beside her and said, "Can you walk?" No name, no rank, just a question. A voice full of quiet concern. She had nodded. He had pulled her to her feet, and together they escaped into the smoke. When her forces arrived hours later, he was gone, and the records of what happened were classified, buried. Her empire didn't want anyone to know she had been saved by a human, a nameless soldier with no medals and no bloodline, so they made the story disappear. But she never forgot. Every night before sleep, she would remember the hand that reached out, the one moment someone saw her as a person, not a title. Years passed. Peace returned. The council rose. But that memory stayed, buried like a diamond under years of duty and silence. And now, that same human stood before her again. Jace Revan, the nameless soldier, had grown into a leader, a hero to his people. But to her, he was still the man who never asked who she was. Just if she could walk, she turned to face him again. Her voice shook, not from fear, but from truth. It was you, wasn't it? She asked. In the war, you were the one. Jace nodded slowly. I never forgot, he said. I saw someone who needed help, so I helped. It didn't matter what crown was on your head. Her eyes softened. She stepped closer. For the first time in her life, her armor didn't feel like protection. It felt like a cage. You saved me once, she whispered, and now you've saved me again. This time, not from war, but from loneliness. Jace reached for her hand again. This time she didn't hesitate. She placed her hand in his, and around them, the court didn't cheer, didn't clap. They simply stood in silence, because they all felt it. This wasn't a show. This was real. The speaker tried one last time to object. Even if this union is accepted, the Empire won't follow, he warned. They will turn against you. Lysera turned to him and said, Then let them. Then let them. If an empire can't accept its queen's heart, it is not worth serving. Her voice echoed into history. Those words were burned into every holoscreen, carved into the minds of billions. That day, Lysera didn't just choose a man, she chose freedom. She chose to live as herself, and the galaxy had no choice but to watch her rise again. Not just as a queen, but as something stronger, a woman reborn, standing beside the one who saw her before the crown ever mattered. Across the stars, everything paused. Warships drifted without command. Broadcasts looped the same moment over and over. The image of Queen Lysera holding a human's hand, her face calm, her eyes unafraid. Beside her stood Commander Jace Revan. No crown, no armor, just his quiet strength and a choice that changed everything. From the core worlds of the Etherion Empire to the far moons of human colonies, all voices spoke the same question. Is this real? Some called it betrayal, others called it hope, but no one could ignore it. Inside the council chamber, the mood had shifted. No longer chaos, no longer panic, just silence, the kind of silence that comes before a storm, or before something brand new is born. A small alien diplomat leaned toward another and whispered, If she breaks tradition, everything breaks with her. But Queen Lysera heard it. She turned toward the council once more and spoke with quiet power. I do not break tradition, she said. I choose a new one. She looked around the chamber, and then beyond it, because she knew this moment wasn't just about her. It was about every ruler, every soldier, every lonely soul who thought they had no right to choose love. And now, here she was, doing it first. Jace stood tall, not holding her back, not leading her forward, just standing with her, equal together. The speaker looked exhausted. He had argued law, history, and balance. But none of it worked against truth. Now he said only one thing. Then let your people judge you. Lysera nodded. I welcome their judgment. A message was sent across the stars. The queen had made her decision. She would not take a new planet. She would not accept a new throne. She had chosen a human, not for strategy, not for politics, but because she wanted to. The Empire's grand halls filled with shocked voices. Her advisors demanded explanations. Generals warned of rebellion. Noble houses prepared to withdraw their support. But she didn't bend. She sent back only one message. You may lead by fear, but I choose to lead by truth. On Earth, humans gathered around screens in cafes, homes, and city plazas. Some cheered, some cried, but one message echoed everywhere. He chose her, and she chose him back. Meanwhile, in orbit above a neutral moon, the two of them stood at a balcony overlooking a gathering of delegates. It was not a wedding, not a political treaty, just a simple moment of truth before the galaxy. Lysera turned to Jace and said softly, I don't know what happens next. Even I can't predict it, Jace smiled. We never did any of this to predict. We did it because it was real. She looked into his eyes. You could have asked for anything. Why ask for something that puts you in danger? He chuckled gently. I didn't ask for danger. I asked for you. Danger just came with the package. She laughed, truly laughed for the first time in her life, not a royal laugh, a real one. It echoed off the metal walls and surprised even her guards. One of them blinked and muttered, She laughs? But Jace wasn't surprised. He had seen the real her long ago, buried under duty, waiting to breathe. Back in the chamber, a decision was made. The council could not deny the choice. The law allowed any reward, and love, real, honest love, was now written. In the records, for the first time in galactic history, a queen was claimed not by force, not by tradition, but by her own heart. Outside, the people began to shift, not in riots, not in rage, but in curiosity, in inspiration, in something they hadn't felt in centuries. Belief that change could be beautiful, and all because one man, when given everything, asked only for her. The stars above the neutral moon shined brighter than ever before, but they were not as bright as the eyes of the galaxy. Billions watched from every corner of known space, waiting for what would happen next. There was no crown on Queen Lysera's head now, no heavy cloak on her shoulders, no armored guards at her side. She stood in a simple, elegant gown, no royal colors, no glowing symbols, just herself. Beside her stood Jace Reven, still in his worn black uniform, still the soldier who once saved her without knowing who she was, still the man who asked for nothing but her. The crowd around them was silent. Alien leaders, noble houses, human ambassadors, royal commanders, all frozen in this one moment, one that history would never forget. A platform had been prepared, not for ceremony, not for power, but for truth. Lysera stepped forward alone. Her voice reached every speaker, every broadcast, every waiting heart. I was born into a line of rulers, she began, taught never to need, never to want, never to feel. For years, I ruled with that belief. That love was weakness. That connection was distraction. She paused. Her eyes scanned the crowd, not in pride, but in peace. Then came war. Then came pain. And in that fire, one human held out his hand, not to take my crown, but to help me stand. Jace watched her from behind, his heart pounding, not from fear, but from the feeling that this wasn't just her story, it was theirs. Lysera turned slightly, and her voice softened. He could have asked for anything, gold, command, immortality. But instead he asked for me, and I choose him in return. A gentle hum of shock rippled through the crowd. Not anger, not outrage, just the sound of walls crumbling slowly, tradition bending, hearts awakening. She held out her hand, open, honest, bare of rings or power. Jace, she said, I give you nothing but myself. And Jace stepped forward. He didn't kneel. He didn't make a speech. He just took her hand with both of his and nodded once. I never wanted anything else, Betty said. Just you. And then it happened. Lysera smiled, fully, truly. Not a half smile, not a political smile, but a smile that reached her soul, a smile that said she was free, that she was home, that she was seen across every planet, screen, and channel. The image was captured. Her priceless reaction. The kind of smile that could stop a war, start a peace, and shake empires. Cameras flashed, drones hovered, messages exploded across the networks. But none of that mattered, because in that moment, Jace and Lysera only saw each other. No throne, no pressure, just two hearts that had waited far too long to find each other again. The speaker stood and said nothing. There was nothing left to say. This was bigger than rules, bigger than law. This was real. Some walked away in protest. Some stood still, frozen in awe. Some wept, because in this cold galaxy, filled with machines and metal and silence, two beings had found something rare. Love born from war and made stronger by choice. Later that night, in the quiet of the stars, Lysera and Jace sat beneath the open sky. No guards, no press, just stars above and peace below. She leaned her head against his shoulder and whispered, I never thought I'd get to be me. Jace smiled. You've always been you. They just didn't see it. She closed her eyes. But you did. And in the end, that was all she needed. Not a kingdom, not control, just one person who saw the queen, but chose the woman, and the galaxy would never be the same again.